My father gave my brother a promotion, now they want me to come back to them. Ryan had dedicated 15 years of his life to Taylor & Sons Plumbing, his father's business, pouring his sweat, intellect, and skill into its growth. At 34, he was not just another employee. He was the backbone of the company. With a business degree, a master plumber's license, and a mind for efficiency, he had implemented systems that streamlined operations, reduced costs, and boosted profits. Under his careful planning, the company flourished. He modernized customer service, introduced new software for scheduling jobs, and refined their supply chain. Every success, every expansion, every record-breaking revenue quarter could be traced back to Ryan's effort. Yet, none of it seemed to matter. Because there was Nick. Nick, the younger brother. Nick, the golden child. Nick, who at 31 had neither the qualifications nor the work ethic of his older brother, yet somehow still managed to sit in a cushy position within the company. Their father, Harold, had always favored Nick, shielding him from consequences, rewarding him for the bare minimum, and dismissing Ryan's concerns whenever he pointed out Nick's incompetence. Ryan had earned his place at Taylor & Sons. He had started at the bottom, working in the trenches as an apprentice, learning the trade firsthand before advancing into leadership. He had pulled all-nighters drafting business plans, worked weekends when emergency jobs piled up, and personally handled their biggest client. But when it came time to acknowledge his contributions, Harold would always glance past him, to Nick. Nick, who had never so much as fixed a leaking pipe. Nick had spent years avoiding responsibility, barely making it through school, and floating between failed business ideas before their father finally handed him a position at Taylor & Sons. The title was vague, operations supervisor, or client relations manager, something meaningless that excused him from real work. His responsibilities were equally undefined, yet his paycheck rivaled Ryan's, and his influence within the company grew. Ryan tried to ignore it. He told himself that if he just worked harder, if he made himself indispensable, Harold would have to acknowledge the truth. But the truth didn't matter. No matter what Ryan did, Harold always found a way to credit Nick. When Ryan introduced a new digital invoicing system that cut down errors and improved cash flow, Nick was the one praised for bringing innovation to the company, despite never having touched a single invoice. When Ryan landed a major contract with a real estate development firm, Harold publicly commended Nick for expanding their client base. Even the plumbing crews, the men who had worked under Ryan for years, were starting to grumble about the blatant favoritism. One particular incident burned itself into Ryan's memory. A major client had an emergency, a burst pipe flooding an upscale apartment complex. Ryan had taken charge, coordinating the team and ensuring the job was completed flawlessly. The client, impressed by the efficiency, called Harold personally to express gratitude. Harold's response? Yes, Nick's been really stepping up lately. Ryan had stood there, speechless, as his father laughed into the phone, soaking up the praise on behalf of the brother who hadn't even known about the job until it was over. And Nick? Nick had simply grinned, accepting the credit with that smug, effortless charm he had relied on his entire life. The humiliation was constant. Nick strutted around the office, barking orders he didn't understand, making decisions without consulting anyone, and expecting Ryan to clean up the mess. He would show up late, take long lunches, and leave early, while Ryan buried himself in work. Even worse was when Harold began involving Nick in high-level business discussions that Ryan had spearheaded for years. Nick would sit there, nodding along, contributing nothing of value, while Harold increasingly directed questions at him instead of Ryan. And then came the final insult. One day, Harold called a company-wide meeting. The staff gathered in the warehouse, expecting a routine announcement. Instead, Harold cleared his throat and said, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize Nick for all the incredible work he's done lately. He's really taken initiative in pushing this company forward." Ryan felt the ground shift beneath him. "In fact," Harold continued, beaming, "I'm excited to announce that Nick will be stepping into a larger leadership role. Effective immediately, he'll be overseeing all operations." A slow, polite round of applause rippled through the crowd. Ryan's vision blurred. He was the one who had built the operational structure from the ground up. He was the one who handled day-to-day logistics. And now, Nick was being handed control of everything he had worked for. The worst part? Nick had the audacity to turn to Ryan afterward, clap him on the back and say, "Don't worry, bro. I'll make sure you're taken care of." As if Ryan was some employee lucky to have a job under his younger brother's leadership. As if he hadn't earned every inch of respect that was now being stripped away. As if he hadn't sacrificed years of his life only to be shoved aside in favor of someone who had done nothing. Ryan clenched his fists, swallowing the rage that threatened to consume him. He had always known his father favored Nick. But this was betrayal. Ryan had always been careful about keeping his personal life separate from work, but when Julie joined Taylor and Sons Plumbing as the new office manager, something shifted. She was different, sharp, competent, and refreshingly genuine. Unlike the chaos that surrounded Nick, Julie actually cared about doing things right. She streamlined operations, handled clients with ease, and brought a level of professionalism the company had desperately needed. More than that, she noticed Ryan. For the first time in a long while, someone saw him for his hard work, for his quiet dedication. They started talking during lunch breaks, first about work, then about music, books, travel, everything. With Julie, Ryan could breathe. She made him laugh in a way he hadn't in years, and when she vented about frustrating office policies or shared her dreams of hiking the Appalachian Trail, he listened, not just because he liked her, but because he respected her. It wasn't just attraction. It was connection. So, after months of talking, of stolen glances across the office, and long conversations that stretched past closing time, Ryan took a leap. He asked Julie out. It wasn't some grand gesture, just an honest, straightforward invitation to dinner that Friday night. And she said yes. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ryan had something to look forward to, something that was his. Then, Nick ruined it. Nick, who had barely spoken to Julie before, who had spent months ignoring her presence in the office, suddenly took an interest the moment he found out Ryan had asked her out. At first, Ryan thought nothing of it. But then he noticed how Nick suddenly started dropping by Julie's desk more often, leaning against her chair, flashing that effortless grin. He overheard Nick casually bringing up activities Ryan knew he had never done: hiking, rock climbing, kayaking. Ryan's stomach dropped. Julie loved the outdoors. She talked about it constantly. It was one of the first things they had bonded over. Her stories of hiking trails, her dream of visiting every national park. Ryan had admitted he wasn't much of a camper, but he admired her passion. And now, Nick was claiming to be the ultimate adventurer, spinning tales of backpacking trips he had never taken, of cliffside sunrises he had only seen in stock photos. Ryan knew what Nick was doing. But it was too late. On Thursday afternoon, just a day before their planned date, Julie stopped by Ryan's desk. He saw the hesitation in her eyes before she even spoke, and his heart sank. "Hey Ryan. I need to talk to you about tomorrow night." She bit her lip, shifting awkwardly. Ryan already knew what was coming, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Yeah," she sighed. "I'm really sorry, but I have to cancel. Something came up." Something. Not someone. Ryan wasn't an idiot. He glanced past her, toward Nick's office, where his brother sat grinning at his phone, completely oblivious, or, more likely, completely satisfied with himself. Julie hesitated as if waiting for him to say something, but what was there to say? It was done. He nodded once. Got it. And that was it. By Monday, Julie and Nick were a thing. It was fast. Too fast. The kind of fast that made it clear that whatever Nick had said to her had been enough to erase everything Ryan had built. The humiliation came in waves. Nick paraded her around the office like a trophy, stopping by Ryan's desk just a little too often, draping an arm over Julie's shoulder like he was staking a claim. Julie, who had once leaned over Ryan's desk, laughing at his dry humor, now giggled at Nick's exaggerated stories, the same ones Ryan knew were complete fabrications. At first, Ryan thought maybe Julie would see through it. She was smart, after all. She had to realize Nick was full of it. But she didn't. Or maybe she just didn't care. Nick was charming. He always had been. He had an easy way of making people feel special, even when he was lying straight to their faces. And Julie, God, Julie, she fell for it. The lunches Ryan and Julie used to share? Gone. Their conversations? Reduced to polite, clipped exchanges. And the worst part? The way Nick made sure Ryan knew exactly what he had taken from him. It wasn't enough that he had stolen Julie's attention. He had to rub it in. "You dodged a bullet, man," Nick told him one afternoon, leaning against his desk with that smug smirk. "Julie's sweet, but she's really into the outdoors, you know? Probably wouldn't have worked out between you two." Ryan clenched his fists under the desk. Nick continued. "She's been begging me to take her hiking this weekend. Thinking of heading up to Red Rock. Real remote, real rugged. You ever been?" Ryan knew for a fact that Nick had never set foot on a trail in his life. And yet, here he was, weaving another lie, knowing damn well that Ryan could do nothing about it. Ryan said nothing. That was the worst part. There was nothing he could say. Julie had made her choice. And just like everything else in Ryan's life, Nick had taken it from him. 15 years. That's how long Ryan had given to Taylor and Sons Plumbing. 15 years of grinding, sacrificing, and pouring every ounce of himself into making the business successful. He had watched the company grow because of his efforts, his strategies, his long nights and early mornings. And finally, after all those years, he had been given something in return, a promotion to senior operations manager. It wasn't just a title, it was recognition. It was proof that his work mattered. And with the promotion came something tangible, a brand new company truck. Not just any truck. This was top of the line, fully loaded, a vehicle that symbolized his years of dedication. The moment Ryan saw it, parked outside the office with his name on the paperwork, something inside him swelled with pride. Finally, something was his. For once, Nick wasn't the one getting rewarded for doing nothing. For once, Ryan had won. That feeling lasted exactly 5 days. Sunday dinner at his parents' house had been a tradition for as long as Ryan could remember. He didn't enjoy them, but he went anyway. He told himself it was out of obligation, but deep down, it was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, one day he'd sit at that table and feel like part of the family instead of the workhorse that kept it running. That night, he walked into the house, expecting the usual. Instead, he walked straight into a celebration. Balloons, champagne, everyone smiling. His mother rushed over, squeezing his arm, eyes bright with excitement. "Oh, Ryan! You're just in time. We have big news." Nick stood at the center of the room, arms slung around Julie's waist, grinning like he had just won the lottery. Ryan already knew what was coming. "We're engaged." Julie beamed, holding out her hand to show off the massive diamond on her finger. The room erupted in cheers. Ryan stood frozen, his stomach twisting into knots. He had been dreading this moment for months, ever since he watched Julie slip further and further into Nick's orbit. But hearing it out loud, seeing her there, glowing at Nick's side like he was the best thing that had ever happened to her, it was like a punch to the gut. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for the perfect moment to destroy him, his father cleared his throat and said, "And that's not all. We have a special gift for the happy couple." Ryan barely had time to process the words before Harold clapped Nick on the back. "I figured this was the perfect occasion to give you something special, son. The new company truck, it's yours." Silence. Ryan's ears rang. His father kept talking, oblivious to the way Ryan's entire world had just cracked in half. "You've worked so hard, Nick. And now, starting a new chapter with Julie, I wanted to make sure you had something solid to rely on. A man needs a good truck to take care of his family, after all." The laughter, the congratulations, the clinking of glasses, it all blurred together. Ryan couldn't move. He had worked for that truck. He had earned that promotion. And in the span of seconds it had been taken from him, just handed to Nick like everything else in life. And the worst part? Nick wasn't even surprised. He just nodded, smirking as if this was exactly what he expected. "Wow, Dad. That's incredible. Thanks. I mean, Ryan, you don't mind, right?" Ryan barely heard his own voice when he said, "It was mine." His father chuckled. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just a truck. Just a truck. Just like it was just a promotion. Just like it was just Julie. Just like it was just his entire life being stripped from him, piece by piece, while everyone stood around pretending it was normal. Ryan had always swallowed it. The favoritism, the betrayals, the humiliation. He had always taken it, let it sink into his bones, and convinced himself that if he just worked harder, if he just proved himself, one day it would pay off. But not this time. Ryan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You know what? No." The room quieted. "No." His father frowned. "No what?" "No, I'm done." Ryan stepped back, his heart pounding, his hands clenched at his sides. 15 years. 15 goddamn years I've given to this family. To this business. And what do I get? Nothing. No, worse than nothing. I get treated like I don't exist while Nick walks in, takes credit for my work, and gets rewarded for it. Nick snorted. "Oh, come on, Ryan." Ryan whipped toward him, eyes burning. "Shut up, Nick. Just shut up. You haven't earned a damn thing in your life, and you know it." Nick's smirk faltered, but Ryan didn't care. He turned to his father. "You want to give him my truck? Fine. Give him my job too. I quit." His mother gasped. "Ryan, don't be ridiculous." "I'm not," he cut her off. "I should have done this years ago." Then, without waiting for another word, he walked out. By the time he reached his car, his phone was buzzing. Calls from his mother. A text from Nick. "Dude, don't be like this." Ryan laughed bitterly. "Like this? Like what? Like someone who finally woke up?" He got into his car, pulled out his phone, and opened his email. Subject: Resignation. Body: effective immediately, I am resigning from Taylor & Sons Plumbing. He hit send. And for the first time in his life, he was free. Ryan didn't look at his phone for the rest of the night. He didn't need to. The second he walked out of that house, he knew exactly how it would go. His parents would panic, Nick would play the victim, and his mother would call over and over, trying to reel him back in with guilt. And right on schedule, his phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls from mom. Text from dad. Come to your senses, son. Nick, dude, this is childish. Call me. Julie of all people. Ryan, please, let's talk. He ignored every single one. By morning, they were at his door. A knock, followed by his mother's voice. Ryan, honey, we need to talk. Then his father. You're making a mistake, son. You can't just walk away. Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the door, jaw clenched. For years, he had put up with this. 4 years, he had let them decide his worth, let them take from him over and over again. But not anymore. He turned, walked into his bedroom, and shut the door. They knocked again. And again. Eventually, they gave up. 2 days later, Ryan had a new job. It hadn't even been hard. The moment word got out that he had left Taylor and Sons Plumbing, calls started coming in. People knew him. They knew what he could do. And when Wilson Plumbing and Heating offered him a meeting, he took it. Ryan sat across from John Wilson, the owner, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. John didn't waste time. I've been watching Taylor and Sons for a while. Ever since you started running operations, that company turned into something real. But I also know how Harold runs things. And I know he doesn't appreciate what he's got. Ryan exhaled slowly. I don't want to waste my time somewhere that doesn't value me. John smiled. Good. Because I do. He slid a contract across the table. Senior partner track. Competitive salary, bonuses, and full benefits. You'd be running the show with me. Sound fair? Ryan barely glanced at the paperwork before shaking John's hand. For the first time in his career, someone was offering him a future. And then there was the truck. Not just a truck, the truck. Bigger, better, brand new. Wilson Plumbing didn't do second-hand hand-me-downs. The moment Ryan signed on, he was handed the keys to a gleaming, fully loaded, heavy-duty work truck that put the one his father had promised him to shame. Ryan took his time driving home that night, and when he passed by his parents' house, he made sure they saw him. Nick was outside. He turned at the sound of the engine, eyes widening as Ryan slowed just enough for him to get a good look. Nick's own truck, the one that was supposed to be Ryan's, looked pitiful in comparison. Ryan didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just kept driving. By the end of the week, Taylor and Sons Plumbing was in chaos. The first problem was scheduling. Ryan had spent years refining their system, making sure crews were sent where they needed to be, minimizing delays, and keeping customers happy. Now, jobs were double booked. Crews were showing up to the wrong addresses. The second problem was the finances. Ryan had handled everything: cost projections, budgeting, vendor relationship. Without him, invoices piled up, orders weren't placed, and payroll went into a spiral. The third problem? Nick. For the first time in his life, Nick had to actually do something. And he was failing. The crews didn't respect him. He didn't know how to talk to suppliers. He had no clue how to fix the scheduling mess. And the more things fell apart, the more obvious it became that Nick had been nothing but a figurehead, coasting on Ryan's work. Clients started leaving. Employees started quitting. And Harold, stubborn, proud Harold, was finally forced to realize what he had done. He started calling again. Ryan let it ring. He let every call, every text, every desperate attempt go unanswered. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't need them. They needed him. Taylor and Sons Plumbing was unraveling. It started as a slow decline, a few minor mistakes that seemed harmless at first. A missed invoice here. A double-booked appointment there. Small things. But Ryan had spent 15 years keeping those small things from happening in the first place. Without him, those little cracks widened. And then the whole foundation collapsed. The biggest clients were the first to go. Developers, contractors, and property managers, people Ryan had built relationships with, people who trusted him, started looking elsewhere. Calls went unanswered. Scheduled maintenance jobs were forgotten. Emergencies weren't handled with the speed and precision they were used to. Clients don't stay loyal to incompetence. One by one, they walked. Nick was completely out of his depth. As senior operations manager, he was supposed to be running the show. But instead of handling the growing chaos, he spent his time on social media, posting pictures of himself with Julie, showing off his truck, bragging about his big promotion. Meanwhile, the office was falling apart. Paperwork piled up on his desk. Permits, contracts, vendor invoices, all forgotten as Nick scrolled through his phone, completely oblivious to the disaster unfolding around him. The vendors stopped giving them priority. The suppliers started demanding payment up front. The company's reputation, once rock solid, crumbled. The employees noticed. Ryan had kept things moving smoothly, making sure jobs were assigned properly, that everyone had what they needed. Without him, there was no order. Crews were sent to job sites without the right equipment. Plumbing materials ran out because Nick forgot to reorder supplies. Payroll checks were delayed. The resentment toward Nick grew quickly. He had always been the boss's favorite, the guy who showed up late and still got rewarded. But now, with Ryan gone, there was no one to cover for him. No one to pick up his slack. And Julie? Julie saw it. At first, she had believed Nick's charm, his confidence. He had swept in, told her everything she wanted to hear, made her feel like she had chosen the right man. But the more time she spent with him, the more she realized who he really was. Lazy. Unreliable. Dishonest. He wasn't the brilliant, hard-working leader he had pretended to be. He wasn't even capable of running a simple meeting without getting distracted. And now, as the business crumbled around him, Julie was stuck watching the man she had chosen prove himself to be an utter failure. She had given up Ryan for this? Meanwhile, Harold, in a desperate attempt to fix things, did the one thing he had always refused to do. He hired outside help. 2 new managers were brought in to replace Ryan. 2 people. And they still couldn't keep up. One handled scheduling, trying to untangle the mess Nick had made, but it was like bailing out a sinking ship with a bucket. The other handled finances, digging through a disaster of unpaid invoices, past-due vendor accounts, and dwindling cash flow. But there was one thing neither of them could fix: trust. The employees no longer trusted management. The clients no longer trusted the company. And worst of all, Harold no longer trusted Nick. For the first time in his life, Nick wasn't being shielded. He wasn't being protected from his own incompetence. His father was watching him now, seeing what Ryan had always known. Nick wasn't a leader. He wasn't even a worker. He was a failure. And for the first time, there was no one left to save him. Ryan had never felt lighter. For the first time in his life, he wasn't dragging the weight of his family's expectations, their betrayals, or their endless demands. He woke up every morning without the pressure of fixing someone else's mistake. He went to work knowing he was valued, knowing his contributions mattered. And the best part? He had left Taylor and Sons behind to rot in the mess they had created. Wilson Plumbing and Heating was everything Taylor and Sons had never been, a well-run, professional business that actually rewarded competence. Ryan thrived there. He didn't just work, he built something. John Wilson treated him like a partner, not a disposable asset, and within months, Ryan was overseeing entire operations, making real decisions, growing the company in ways he had never been allowed to before. And then there was Kate. Kate wasn't like Julie. She was an architect who worked on large-scale commercial projects, someone Ryan kept running into on job site. She was smart, direct, and had zero patience for nonsense. The first time they met, she had walked up to him, holding a blueprint, and said, "If I see another lazy install job, I swear I'm tearing the whole thing down myself." Ryan had smirked. "Good thing I don't do lazy installs." She had studied him for a second, then nodded. "Good. Let's get to work." She wasn't impressed by shallow charm, didn't waste time on empty flattery. She respected people who did their job well, who knew what they were doing. And Ryan? Ryan was exactly that kind of person. They started talking more, running into each other on different projects. Lunches turned into long conversations, conversations turned into inside jokes, and before Ryan even realized it, she had become part of his life. Kate saw him, not as a workhorse, not as someone to use, as a man worth knowing. Meanwhile, Taylor and Sons Plumbing was in full-blown disaster mode. The new managers were barely keeping things together, employees were quitting, and Harold was scrambling to stop the company from imploding. And Nick? Nick was floundering. His charm, his empty confidence, none of it could save him now. He didn't know how to fix what he had broken. He couldn't fake his way through actual leadership. And Julie? Julie was trapped. She had tied herself to a man who was proving to be a complete failure, a man she was now realizing had been lying to her from the start. The outdoorsy, hard-working, ambitious guy she thought she had chosen didn't exist. He never had. And as she watched Nick struggle, watched the business fall apart around them, she couldn't ignore the truth anymore. She had made a mistake. But Ryan didn't care anymore. He didn't care about Nick. He didn't care about Julie. He didn't care about any of them. So when his mother started calling again, begging him to come back, he didn't even hesitate. "Ryan, please," she pleaded over the phone. Your father is stressed, Nick is overwhelmed, we need you. You're the only one who can fix this. Ryan exhaled slowly, shaking his head. No. Ryan, this is your family. No, he repeated, firmer this time. I was your family when I gave 15 years of my life to that company. And what did that get me? Nothing. His mother was silent. For the first time, she had no argument. Because she knew he was right. Ryan didn't wait for her to find one. He hung up. That night, as he sat in his new truck, looking out over the city, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. He had walked away from them, from the lies, the favoritism, the endless cycle of being used. And it was the best decision he had ever made.